So good afternoon, Nabo Circle. I'm so excited to have you all together again. And today we have our masterclass on DEI and cultivating a culture of diversity and equity and inclusion, and in a very complex and busy world. So our guest today is Whitney Mertz. She is from TriNet. And if you don't know, TriNet is one of the great corporate partners of NABO National. And if you don't know who TriNet is, they are a fantastic professional employer organization that handles all things HR. And so that's a really general statement, but those are things like benefits and HR consulting and payroll administration and risk mitigation and all of those awesome things that your HR department needs to be doing. And if they're not, then you need to talk to TriNet. So here's your sales plug. Sorry, it was not better executed than that. But seriously, TriNet is a fantastic partner. And Whitney is here to present with us today. And so I'm going to turn it over to Whitney. And at the end, there will be time for Q&A. So as we're going through, if you have questions, or if there's something, a situation that you currently have and it's bringing up questions as we go through this today, please do save those, because we will have time to have real conversation at the end. And so with that, Whitney.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda. And hello, everyone. I am so happy to be here with all of you today to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I know is top of mind for so many individuals. Couple of things before we get started. I do have one disclaimer to share with you. You can see here on the screen, this presentation is for educational purposes only. TriNet provides HR guidance and best practices. TriNet does not provide legal tax or accounting advice. So the materials in this presentation and the products, advice, and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those prepared by the presenter, not necessarily those of TriNet. So a little bit more, and Linda, thank you for introducing a little bit about TriNet. A little bit more for those of you who may not be familiar. TriNet does provide small and medium-sized businesses with full-service, industry-specific HR solutions. So providing both professional employer organization and human resources information system services. And we work with more than 22,000 small businesses across the country. We support an average of 544,000 employees. And at TriNet, we approach all opportunities from the perspective of small and medium-sized businesses. So yes, we solve for things like HR compliance and risk management, certainly payroll, and access to top quality benefits so that small business owners can do what they do best. They can grow their business, they can enable their people. And TriNet over the years has been recognized in a multitude of ways. In addition to being listed on the New York Stock Exchange, being ESAC certified, we've received 2 TrustRadius top-rated awards in the areas of HR management and payroll. And these awards have become the industry standard for that unbiased recognition of business-to-business technology products. In addition, TriNet is very proud to have been named by Fast Company as a 2022 brand that matters for our People Matter campaign that celebrated the hardworking and the diverse employees of tens of thousands of SMB customers in the height of the pandemic. And most recently, we won multiple Stevie Awards recognizing the positive impact that TriNet has had on SMBs through our annual TriNet People Force Conference, which we just had our latest one in September. So very, very exciting times. But that's a little bit about TriNet. I want to spend just a moment to talk about what we're going to be covering today. And first, we are going to level set with a definition of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and why it's important for people and important for business. And then we will take some time to explore the components of a strong DEI program. And then finally, we want to leave you with actions that you can take to activate change in your organization. So before we get started, let's lay the foundation with a brief overview of some micro trends that are impacting the workforce today. So, certainly the COVID crisis accelerated many trends that were already in play, but most importantly, it helped employees realize that they have the leverage to demand change in the workplace. And one of the things that we've seen is the rise of purpose. So, no matter their role, employees need to feel a sense of meaning in their work. Employees are definitely looking for more than a paycheck. They want purpose. They want to know that the company's mission, the company's vision aligns with their own. And stakeholders also find meaning when their organizations tackle the big challenge that they face, right? To do good in the world. There's also the humanization of the workforce. The changing workforce is certainly continuing to put diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, at the forefront. And according to current statistics from Indeed and Glassdoor, 74% of US workers say that corporate investment in DEI is very important or somewhat important to them when they're even considering a new job. Then there's the distributed and remote work teams. And remote work, hybrid work is here to stay. And yes, it can certainly be beneficial for flexibility, but at the same time, it can be disrupted to company culture, to collaboration. There can be potential fears over job security or career progression due to the isolation. And there's also employee well being. So, in addition to the mayhem that COVID had on the labor market, it also impacted the mental health of so many in the workplace. And it's become even more important than ever to focus on employee mental and physical health. Employees are actually looking for places where they can feel supported in these areas. Retention, we've all seen the same reports, read the same reports about retention out there. And in any type of economy, the best employees can always find new opportunities. So companies have to focus on ways to keep employees engaged and keep them productive. And in order to keep up, companies need to find new strategies to engage their employees. So we'll take a look at some quick definitions. Uh, With diversity, diversity is when a collection of differences and similarities are represented throughout an organization. And equity is about meeting people where they are. So providing that fair and consistent treatment and opportunity. Inclusion is when the thoughts and the ideas and the perspectives of all employees aren't just heard, but they're respected and they're valued. And then at the intersection of DEI is belonging. And belonging is when all feel welcomed and truly feel like they're a part of the organization. And every organization is at a different place in their journey towards a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I'd love to get an idea of where you all feel your organization is. So we're going to launch a quick poll and just a little bit about where is your organization on the DEIB journey? Is it we're really just kind of getting started with it, or no, we've dipped our toe in, we have a couple of things going on. Maybe it's already a top priority for you, or maybe you already are well along the journey. You have a very DEI strategy in place. Just to get some quick thoughts there. Awesome. So thank you, everybody. So it looks like 22% of you say we are really just getting started. Another 22%, we've dipped our toe in. We're starting to get things going. 11% of you say it's already a top priority for us, and almost half, 44%, said you have a mature DEI strategy in place. And I love to see that, and thank you all for sharing that. I love to see the mixture. That lets me know we'll have some great input. We'll have some great questions along the way. So thank you. Let's look at some of the statistics that really tell the story of why DEIB is important in your organization. So focusing on DEIB is a win-win for both individuals and for organizations. And first, I would say it is what job seekers and employees are demanding, as you can see here from statistics around the good for people aspect, right? Evidence shows that when people feel valued, they actually function at a higher capacity. They more feel a part of the organization's mission. And second, we know people win, but investing time and resources in DEIB initiatives, it's not just the right thing to do for people. We also know that DEIB focused organizations also win out. You can see the statistics there. 70% more likely to capture new markets, 37% more likely to outperform on profitability, and making better decisions 87% of the time. So, with that in mind, let's talk about some shifts that we've been seeing around DEIB. The organizational stance related to DEIB has changed. It's really shifted quite significantly over the past few years. It's evolved into this entirely new mindset, entirely new outlook. When we talk about objectives, it's gone from what we call counting people, right? When you think about ethnicity, gender, age, for example, to making people count with that focus on the human element, that humanization of the workforce that we touched on a little bit earlier. Then with engagement, the shift has been from, well, it's not my fight, right? It's not my job, to true ownership and advocacy for change. People have gone from this passive observer stance to being active participants, to taking ownership of dismantling inequitable systems or policies. And then around outcomes, from DEI kind of being this one and done type of situation, what we call the moment, to being an ongoing transformation, a true journey about the movement. So now we've identified the then and now landscape of DEIB. Let's talk a little bit about, where do you start, right? Well, you start by defining a vision of where you want to go. So start with why DEIB is important to you as a human, right? To you personally, but also why it's important to your organization. Because without a strong why motivation, well, then the follow through can kind of drift, right? So you want to establish clear goals and a strategy to achieve your vision. What are your longer term goals? What are your shorter term goals around DEIB? And build in accountability measures. So using those SMART goals, right? Too often also organizations fail to advance DEIB because they haven't assigned responsibility for those goals. So you want to be sure to clarify who will work on what, right? Who's going to work on specific actions? When will that happen? And how will success be measured? And then there's stakeholder buy-in. So lasting change does require buy-in and involvement from stakeholders across your organization. And there definitely must be senior level accountability for that progress. So with this in mind, next we're going to take a look at components of a strong DEI program. So the graphic that you see here illustrates our DEI framework for what we know to be the fundamental elements in creating a successful DEI program. And you'll see there are strategic as well as employee lifecycle elements that are embedded throughout. And many of these areas are complementary to or even overlap one another. So you can see how DEIB elements weave together. We'll look at this from a clockwise sequence, and we'll start with the upper left, the leadership commitment in the light blue. And having executive leadership as a champion of DEIB is truly the cornerstone, which is going to guide and inspire leaders and managers at all levels to actively incorporate a DEIB mindset and a DEIB way of working. Data collection in the bright blue not only includes establishing metrics to measure success, as we mentioned, but it's also, can be a measurement of demographics, can be a piece of that. But it's also going to include additional tools. It might be a DEI leadership assessment. It might be an employee DEI type of survey. And the output of these assessments actually provide you with actionable data that can translate into your strategic plan. And there's other types of data collection methods, right? Maybe you want to do something around focus groups. Maybe you want to utilize net promoter score surveys. These can be performed at different milestones throughout your journey. And then key DEIB priorities for long and short-term goals are identified during the strategy development exercise. That's what you see there in the orange. And this is a deliberate focus on the organization's mission and vision being in sync with DEIB program values and goals. Then you see inclusive culture, right? Culture we know is that secret sauce. They're in the dark blue, and it connects to employer branding in the pink, both of which influence recruiting and retention and your organization's reputation. And there are a wide variety of activities that can actually be defined in these areas to help foster that inclusion and belonging. And then lastly is equitable hiring and talent practices. They're in the purple. And this encompasses a large part of the employee life cycle. It should naturally include training and awareness to build that foundation of understanding, to build that sense of belonging, and promote awareness and collaboration so that we can engage in meaningful conversations. I mentioned earlier that at the intersection of diversity, equity, and inclusion is a feeling. It's that feeling of belonging. So, next, we are going to dive in a bit more into belonging. Fostering belonging in the workplace means that people of all backgrounds get a seat at the table and that they feel heard, they feel seen, and they feel recognized for their contributions. And according to research by BetterUp you may be familiar with as a top online coaching platform, creating a sense of belonging at work can make a huge difference in employee happiness and productivity and performance and retention, leading to a 50% lower risk of turnover. We all know in this today's market, that's highly significant. So the question becomes really, how do you cultivate belonging? And according to global nonprofit DEI think tank coequal.org, belonging at work is rooted in four basic elements. The first element is feeling seen, right? Feeling recognized and rewarded and respected by their employees. The second element is feeling connected at work. So having positive and authentic social interactions with peers and with managers and with senior leaders. And the third element of belonging is feeling supported at work by those around you, from peers to senior leaders, providing what's needed to, yes, get work done, but also to live a full life. And then that fourth element is feeling proud of your work and feeling proud of your organization, feeling aligned to the organization's purpose and vision and values. And of course, leaders have a vital role to play in cultivating belonging. So creating a culture where everyone feels welcome and included is, in today's world, a leadership imperative. And the Harvard Business Review cites that inclusive leaders actually share a cluster of 6 signature traits. So inclusive leaders articulate authentic commitment to diversity with this visible commitment. They challenge the status quo, they hold others accountable, and they make diversity and inclusion a personal priority. And next is humility, where inclusive leaders are modest about their capabilities. They're willing to admit their mistakes and to create the space for others to contribute. There's also curiosity about others, where inclusive leaders demonstrate an open mindset, right? As well as deep curiosity about others. It's about listening without judgment, seeking with empathy to understand those around them. They also have cultural intelligence where they're attentive to others' cultures and they adapt as needed. And they have their own awareness of bias. In fact, I would say the single most important trait generating a sense of inclusiveness is a leader's visible awareness of bias. Right? So, inclusive leaders have an awareness of their own bias, both as an individual and as an organization, and they take active steps to encourage equity and fairness. Employees want to see their leaders are determined to address their biases. Fatalism can look like, hey, I know I have this prejudice, but whatever, I am what I am. Well, in contrast, leaders who are humble acknowledge their own vulnerability to bias and they ask for feedback on their blind spots and their habits. And then there's effective collaboration. Inclusive leaders encourage collaboration, encourage building trust. They want psychological safety so that everyone does feel comfortable speaking up or even challenging the status quo. Inclusive leaders respect differences by providing employees with a variety of ways that they can contribute their opinions, contribute their ideas. So I'd love to hear from you again with our next poll question. And that is, how confident are you that employees are experiencing a sense of belonging at your organization? Is, I'm really not sure. I'm not confident yet, or, I'm kind of confident. Maybe you're very confident, or you just don't know right now. Wait give it a few seconds, let everybody get their answers in. Thank you, Linda. Okay, so no one said they are not at all confident. Wow, I don't see that very often. And no one also said that they're not sure. So a third of you said, I'm somewhat confident, and 67% said very confident. Those are some really strong numbers. So thank you all for sharing that. And I would say, for most organizations, this is a bit of a moving target, even in surveys done with diversity professionals, those with diversity in their titles, it can still be a bit of a moving target. And one of the critical steps to cultivating a culture of inclusion and belonging always starts with the recruiting and the talent acquisition process. So let's dive into that a little bit because recruiting with a DEIB lens requires a very people centric approach that does make people feel seen, feel heard, feel valued from the moment that they interact with your company. So the question then is, what can you do, right? So a few suggestions here on the screen, and one of those is to look for niche diversity sites. Look for those niche networks that have a diverse audience. I think immediately about veterans organizations. We just had Veterans Day, right? Another thing that you can do is consider using software tools that actually mask personal information on resumes to help address that bias in recruiting. So, masking geographic location, for example, masking names, for example. And another piece could be to involve people from different levels, different departments in your hiring and your recruiting processes so that you are able to get perspectives from different members, different ways of thinking on your team. The research is showing that candidates are actually looking for diverse initiatives and interviewing practices when they are considering a company. They are looking at closely at you as you are at them. And you can also showcase your employer brand by telling great stories of your organization, what it's doing in this realm of DEIB. Certainly provide training for your hiring teams. Training can boost awareness and advocacy to help stakeholders become more culturally competent, to become more empathetic, to become more self aware. And this might include fundamental courses, as well as courses on topics like psychological safety, micro behaviors, and unconscious bias. Because I think it's important that we talk a little bit more about unconscious bias and some of the unintended conscious biases that exist in the hiring process. So we know that there are upwards of over 175 types of biases. And bias, unconscious or not, can certainly have negative consequences. So awareness of these biases can help us to alleviate the possibility of hiring decisions being influenced by bias. You can see a few here, and the first one there is name bias. And name bias is the tendency to judge and to prefer people with a certain type of Anglo name. It's a preference for someone based on their first or last name, which impacts your hiring decisions, your decision making, and your judgment. There's also affinity, or sometimes we call it similarity bias, and that's the unconscious decision to favor people who are like us, right? So this could look like something like tending to favor people who, or choose candidates who went to the same school we did, maybe grew up in the same area. And this actually has little to do with their ability to do the job. And since hiring someone who looks or talks or acts like you is certainly an easy trap to fall into, it's important that we are aware of it and that we address it head on. Then there's conformity bias, which can be caused by peer pressure, and that peer pressure affecting hiring decisions. And this can happen in group interviews. Maybe a hiring manager chooses a candidate based on what everyone else wants instead of who they actually think is best for the job. And then there's last is the negative emphasis bias, and that's judging someone negatively based on personal irrelevant preferences, things like height or weight or hairstyle. And all of these things are based on cultural ideas of beauty. They actually hold no indication of an applicant's ability to perform job roles. So, further thinking about hiring, let's talk about posting job descriptions for a moment and doing so in a way to position it in a way that's inclusive to all. So, a few tips here is first to use gender neutral language, right? So, we don't want to use he or she, we use you, and avoid gender coding. So, when we think about gender coding, that's using words that have been historically associated with a specific gender. So, yes, things like instead of using businessman, right, use business person. But also thinking about, are there words that are more gender leaning, right? So a masculine gendered words could be something like strong or competitive, and feminine gendered words could be things like support and caring. We also want to be careful about unintentionally excluding people with physical disabilities. So, as you're thinking about these physical parts of the job, it could be something like instead of using must be able to lift 50 pounds, well, you could say something like has to move equipment up to 50 pounds. Doesn't mean they necessarily have to lift it, right? And then another tip is to eliminate company jargon or company lingo, right? Oftentimes, candidates may have transferable skills from other industry, and when they see that jargon, they see that lingo, they may assume that their skills won't convert based on the language that you utilize. And also be aware that must haves can unintentionally exclude people. Is a bachelor's degree really an absolute requirement, or could work experience be an equivalent there, right? So focus on abilities, what the person can do and what you want them to do. Because the bottom line is that employees want to see organizations take a clear and thoughtful approach to DEIB efforts. And sometimes your first touch with a candidate or potential candidate is actually through that job posting. So we have one more poll that we'd love to hear from you on. And that is when we think about recruiting, you think about it in your organization. To what degree has your organization already adopted recruiting processes to include a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive candidate experience? Is it something you haven't really thought about it yet, haven't really started? Maybe you're Again, just kind of dipping your toe in and getting started, or you've put a few things in place, or something we've really focused on, and we're definitely along the pathway. So, where is everybody? Give it just a few more seconds. Awesome. Thank you, Linda. So again, you've all already started, and then one third, one third, one third on just getting started, adopted a few practices, or we have already made significant progress. So again, love to see that. And no matter where you are in the journey, right? Think about what can you do to further this along. I always think about it. This is the first time an employee is going to know anything about me, anything about my organization is with that job posting and in the recruiting process. So thank you. Let's pull it all together with just a quick success story from my team. We know that DEI for organizations is a journey. Again, it's a movement, it's not a moment, right? And you may experience in that journey some very momentous advancement, and that feeling can be very thrilling, very accomplished feeling, right? And then you might bump into some periods of slowness, and that's okay. What's most important is that the meaningful work is effective and it's impactful, that you're taking actions that are impactful and are meaningful, right? And that requires making certain that your employees are really with you on the journey. So we actually met with an organization in Colorado that at first glance seemed to be quite well along their way into their DEI journey. They had a framework, they had goals, they had a list of activities. But in reality, their efforts were falling flat because the employees weren't really engaged with the movement, right? This particular organization didn't have a DEI purpose statement in place. And the DEI purpose statement is a statement, right? The organization's authentic promise is how I like to think about it. It's about their commitment to DEI efforts. They were struggling to create one at the executive level. They didn't want it to fall on deaf ears. They didn't want it to just be some type of, check the box type of activity. Hey, we did this, we're done. So instead, we engaged with the entire staff. And TriNet actually facilitated an exercise with the staff. And we did it by asking two questions. Why is DEI important to you as a person? And why is it important to your organization? And what followed was an authentic staff level conversation that resulted in the employees drafting DEI, what we would call we believe statements, right? Employees connected with the why because they created it. And it was actually quite a rewarding thing to see. And ultimately, we help them activate their why by way of activities that are meaningful to their specific organization. And their organizational DEI goals align with their we believe statements. So now everyone's on that same train, right? We've engaged the hearts and the minds. It's personal for employees and it's great for the organization. So, where do we go from here? Well, we take action, right? Listen from the heart. Lift every voice. Focus on that human element. Establish a clear vision that gives voice to your DEIB commitment, right? Identify and prioritize in the investments that matter most. Keep it real, right? Employees and candidates are going to easily tell whether an organization's intentions around DEIB is actually authentic. And next, you see there cultivate curiosity, embody that mindset of learning and deep curiosity for the life experiences of others. Tell me more, one of my favorite things to say, right? It may seem like a very simple action, but to one person, it can actually mean the world. Tell me more. And show vulnerability as leaders. When leaders are vulnerable, they move past their own fear of saying the wrong thing. We can all have that fear, right? They can bring these sometimes difficult conversations in the workplace. The DEIB journey can feel very personal. It does require that courage and it does require vulnerability. And next, invite many voices. Invite people into the DEIB story at your organization. Give them a part to play in it. So you can do things like forming a DEI committee, which is a great way to give employees a say in your organization's DEI strategy. You can create a charter or a mission statement that represents the collective voices of the people in your organization. You can think about starting employee resource groups, what we call ERGs, that encourage people of all backgrounds and interests to speak up and to listen and to be heard. I can tell you at TriNet, we have a multitude of what we call colleague resource groups, CRGs, and they're amazing experiences. And then do something, right? None of us have all of this figured out, but it's in doing these small, everyday things that are what matters most. So you can put a stake in the ground today and take those first steps to get there. From McKinsey, finally, organizations can make jobs sticky by investing in more meaning, more belonging, and stronger team and other relational ties. So, with that being said, we definitely want to give you an opportunity to open it up for some questions that may have come in or questions that you may have. I also want to make sure you have some contact information for a couple of my colleagues, David and Gina. If you have additional questions, you can definitely reach out to them. And Gina, I know, is on the call with us today as well. So, thank you, Gina. What questions do we have, Linda?
Currently none. So
Okay.
how about if everybody take a quick screenshot or a picture or write down both David and Gina's information, and then we're going to have you stop screen sharing, and that way you'll be able to see all faces at the same time, and they'll be able to see each other and see you, and that will make asking questions easier.
Absolutely. I'm working on it, I
Easier to
promise.
see people, right? Always good when you can see each other's faces.
Okay, let's see if we can do this here. There we go. How's that?
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Now you can see each other even better.
Wonderful.
Amber has to jump off. That's okay. But okay, great. So now we can see each other. I have to say, Whitney, that was, I think, one of the most easy to understand and information rich presentations I have ever seen on this subject. And as I have a
Fantastic.
great appreciation for what you just did. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. Absolutely. It's important, right, because it's important to give those actionable pieces, right? Those actionable bites. Where can we start today, no matter where we are on the journey? So thank you for that, Linda.
Exactly. And your polls were good. And now I got to practice my polling skills. So it's
Fantastic.
always good to keep our skills sharp.
Yeah.
So any comments or questions? What's going on with you guys, with Carol, Karen, Melissa, Robin, Wendy? Oh, Kathy Durfee's coming back in. She must have accidentally fallen off.
Oh, Kathy, I see. Yeah, I see the word strong is interesting to avoid in a job posting. What are some recommended alternatives? That's a great question, Kathy. As we talk about kind of that gender leaning verbiage that we want to make sure we keep out of our conversations, I would recommend think about when you're saying I want a strong candidate, what does that really mean? Right? Are there particular soft skills that you're intending with that term? And could that be perhaps more clearly delineated in the posting? Or is it that is it a physical capability that you actually need? So really kind of narrowing it down to what you're specifically looking for that job. And thank you for the question. It's a great question.
And when do you think, I mean, Whitney, thank you for the clarification too on the must be able to lift 50 pounds. I mean, how many times have we all written that or read that or seen that over the years, right? Where it was very physical, have to be able to lift. You're right. No, you don't have to physically lift it with your hands. Do you have another way to get it done? And
Exactly.
this is so interesting to me, this whole a shift of a great awareness of what do our words really mean to somebody who does things differently or sees things differently than how we're just used to looking at them.
I love it. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's really about what do you actually need to have done, right?
Yeah.
So thinking about multiple ways it could be done. So Karen, I see your question. How do you demonstrate in recruiting that you have a DEIB strategy? And thank you for that question. Um, there are multiple different ways, I would say. And it needs, whatever you do needs to make sense with your organization. We certainly work with clients who, once we develop their DEI purpose statement, they actually make that part of their career website, right?
Right.
Just as an example, it can be highlighting things that you're doing around DEIB in your conversations with candidates, talking about things like, yes, we actually have CERGs, or if you're interested, we have these committees who further these initiatives. In It could be that you're creating a very diverse interview panel, right? My caution there always is whomever you have involved in your hiring process, make sure you put them through some training around that, right? But so that they can help uncover their own bias and help head those off on the front side. But it's different ways you can show having diverse hiring managers, diversity in hiring managers, maybe giving candidates an opportunity to meet with those diverse hiring managers. So lots of different ways. Thank you.
Well, one thing I went to a DE unconscious bias seminar that
Yes.
a recruiter was putting on, and she mentioned something that I hadn't thought of that as a really good idea is to, when you get the resumes and you do an evaluation, if you're having a panel, look at that and kind of rank them
Mm-hmm.
or rate them, to not share anyone else's ranking or rating before everyone has had the chance to do that in the panel. That way, your preference, maybe you're a hiring manager or you're a little higher in the organization, the person that's also reviewing is like, well, I got to review it that way because Karen feels strongly about that person. Just, takes out some of that bias toward maybe ranking within the organization, maybe not necessarily gender.
I love that, right? That is a great way to help battle that conformity bias that is that peer pressure to essentially vote a certain way, right? So thank you very much for sharing that. I think that's a great idea.
It wasn't mine. I have to give Jolene Risch credit for that.
Thank
Risch
you, Jolene.
who's another NABO excellent, who Linda should be considered for the circle, but
Write your down right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you for bringing it forward in this conversation, Karen. We appreciate that. Awesome.
Hey,
So
Whitney,
yes.
I have one that I've used, and I would just wonder your thoughts. So, several years ago, Chipotle had a recruiting strategy marketing where they said, if you have a tattoo, we want you. And I thought it was kind of a brilliant way to say, hey, there's a certain type of attitude, a certain type of personality that we're looking for. And so anyhow, I would love your thoughts. I've used it as an example, and should I or should I not when thinking about DEI?
You're causing me to pause, Robin. So I appreciate that. I've been thinking that through a little bit. I get where they're coming from. My question then becomes, is that an inclusive thing to say? And I always think about too, because I can tell you, I've been doing this HR thing for over 30 years, and I have never seen a labor market like what I've seen in the last 3 years. So do we want to shut off access to talent? And so I always want to be conscious of anything that may be put out there that is shutting off our access to a broader talent pool. I get it, but that would always be my caution is, can organizations in today's world afford to be shutting off access to talent? Just a thought.
Okay.
But it's an interesting one, and thank you for sharing that. Absolutely.
Can I piggyback on that one really quick?
Sure.
Because I think what it does in part is it's also a culture and purpose statement, the way that was said. So, I mean, you will cut off talent when you do culture and purpose, right? I mean, that's the whole point. We're trying to get everyone who's looking in the same direction. If that's the way to put it. But I totally agree with you also, right? You are limiting. So everything you do, you will always be limiting it. So you just gotta try and decide what are the limits, right?
Right.
That's hard in that case. To me, that's hard.
Right.
I do like the, I mean, here's my tattoo. I do like the thought though, Robin, because it is a culture mindset, Kathy, like you mentioned. And if that is absolutely what you want to make your hiring pool only with that culture, then sure, limit. It will limit talent. But if that's, if you don't want a group of people where someone who doesn't have a tattoo is going to be judgmental of someone who is, and it's going to create a culture issue for you, then sure, you want that inclusive culture that can appreciate someone that has a tattoo equally, then yes. But if like Carol mentions in her notes, if your qualified pool of candidates is already limited enough, then you have to be very careful in shutting out those that might not apply with a statement like that. You may get more that will, but you might get qualified that won't. That would be my thoughts.
It's a very interesting conversation, and I had not seen that one. So again, I think it's making me want to go do a little more research. So thank y'all for bringing that in.
And we've got an interesting question
Okay.
in the chat from Melissa. Anyone else using LinkedIn hide candidate names and photos feature? It helps tremendously in eliminating good talent based on our own biases. Yeah.
Yeah. Using various types of masking that's out there can be a huge component of helping to eliminate bias, because there are, again, they're called unconscious because we're not always aware of them, but they can absolutely influence our decisions. And I like to always toss out sort of my Whitney challenge to all of us, and something I do to myself as well, is if you're ever kind of wondering what your own biases may be, conscious or unconscious, the next time you're out for a walk, or maybe you're just going through the store, and someone you don't know is coming towards you, ask yourself what you've already determined about that person. And that can help to sort of start to unlock and give you access into your own biases. It's kind of an interesting game to play when you're out and about. So,
Whitney, I'll ask.
Yeah.
Linda always knows I'm good for a couple of these. First of all, I would guess everyone on this call has an unconscious bias to hire women. All right. Someone said, why do you always want to hire the women? And you're like, well, darn, I have the wrong bias. But a lot of times, it's very difficult to decide between a bias and a gut feeling. And
Preference.
when I go against my gut feeling, we always get screwed. I'm telling you, it's and I guess most of the women on this call know. We've been doing it a long time. And I don't know, sometimes I think, at least in my industry, maybe they're learned biases. When I make a determination, I'll give you an example. We had a young girl come in here 2 weeks ago, interior designer, but I wasn't meeting with her. We're walking past the lobby, and I literally thought I saw a circus clown. I was like, what's that? Like, she had cotton candy pink hair. She had like I don't know, a tutu skirt. I literally and they interviewed her, and it was very difficult for everyone to get past the fact that she looked like, I don't know where she thought she was going. Now, she was mediocre. So we were talking to her, and I called her, and she says, well, I just want to make sure I can wear my colorful clothing, because I'm thinking, if you have to ask that question, you already know it's an issue. Like, I would never send somebody out to a professional organization looking like that. And she might be quite competent, right? So at some point, I mean, I'm really pretty open to most anything, but at some point, I tell people, you know, this is a professional organization. You know, yeah, we don't wear suits and ties, but you can't look like a circus clown. If you're going out to sell business, you're going out, the client won't have any confidence in you. No different than, you know, we have biases. I always say it's kind of like dating, right? We have biases, and smoking is a big no. You know, when someone walks in a room and they stink, I don't care who it is, it's a big turnoff. I mean, luckily we only have 4 people in our whole entire company that smoke. But I mean, you think of some of these things, and yeah, you don't want to limit your pool of candidates. We can't even find candidates. So for us to have any kind of biases would be just stupid. But I've struggled with this DEI thing because I look at our organization and we've been doing these kind of initiatives for years. And I think that's why we have little to no turnover. We treat people as human beings. We have women, we have men, I started asking, where were you born? Like what country? Just because I want to know. And we have people from all over the world. So unconsciously, we have been doing all these good things, I think. And I think a lot of women in NABO are that way. You know, when I talk to them, like, do I need a policy to tell me that we're going to promote people and then we're going to give them leadership? We've been doing a leadership training. It's our 10th year now. We've just because that's what you do for people, right? You nurture them, you help them, you move them along. And I would love to hire more diverse people. They don't exist in my industry. And if they do, they're, like I said, they're working in like near Molly in DC. They can write their own ticket. There's like one of those people in the country, right? So I don't know, I think these are all good initiatives and things people should think about. I look at them as, we're doing this, we're doing that. Do I really need to write it down? You know, I don't know. You know, I don't know. That's a big question now on all our applications. Do you have a DEI policy? Yeah. You know, what does it mean? Like you said, if it's just a statement, but I think in practice, many of these NABA women, as you can see, are already, you know, acting in that manner.
Yep. And I think and thank you for that, Carol. I think it's so important to think about, should you write it down? I think I'm a firm believer in the why, right? I think having it memorialized as to why this is important. Why is it important to each of you as the business leader? Why is it important, and as a human first, right? And then why is it important to your organization that you continue that journey? I think is an important place to be able to help explain it to those candidates who are looking for it. Because what we know, Carol and group, what we know is that employees more now than I have ever seen, they are looking for that connection to your organization. And I don't just mean about this is the work they can do for your organization. They are looking for that personal connection to their values, to your mission. And this can be a big part of it. Just a thought.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that. I think that we're at a dangerous point in talking about diversity, you know, this DEIB initiative, that it becomes something that almost pushes people away from either side than it does become a inclusion point. Because like Carol said, we're looking for people that fit into our organization, that will feel inclusive naturally, without us having to go, you'll be included because we have a DEIB policy. You'll feel belonged because we have a DEIB, you know, strategy. You're going to feel like you belong because that's the way you feel. And if we focus too much on touting that, then it loses its effectiveness. I mean, I'm with Carol. I wouldn't hire somebody that visually wasn't going to complement, not that they necessarily have to melt. We don't have to have this melting pot, but the salad bowl has to complement everything in the salad bowl, has to complement everything else. And you're not going to take a perfectly made, you know, Greek salad and add, you know, spaghetti into it, because that just doesn't complement what you've got there. And what Carol was talking about was, you know, someone who was not going to fit the culture and the mission and the values that they've created within her organization. And the quest to be diverse, I think, doesn't mean that you have to be, you have to change who you are as a company. I think it means you have to find ways to not have those biases, but like I'm with Carol, that's not going to disturb what's already working within your organization, especially if you've got those kinds of longevity records in your organization, Carol.
Well, the other thing I laugh about too is, like, when you write something down, it's always the rogue employee that can go find it and then challenge you on it. Like, you're not including my thoughts and my opinion, and because your opinion is wrong, like, that's not even part of the building code. Like, did you read the building? Well, this is my interpretation and you should look at it. And it's like, no, we've done like 150 projects and I don't think that the building official is going to agree with your opinion. And then they go down another road. Well, you're not listening to me. You're being biased because you have a policy that you're going to listen to all our ideas. And then you get that one wacky person that you're like, where did you come up with that idea? That can't substantiate it. So, and then they hang their hat on it. So we have policy manuals and rules because somebody broke them somewhere. We said, oh, we have to have, we're not working from home policy. Like, now, okay, we have to write it down because somebody didn't want to listen, or we have to tell you this because somebody didn't listen. They had to write the 10 commandments because people couldn't behave, right? So, I mean, it's all how our laws and everything evolved. And I just think sometimes it's better left unsaid. And, you practice it, and that's how I think you build a good culture. You talked about the statement. We never had a mission statement, because all the mission statements for A&E firms look exactly the same. I could pull 20 firms, it's the same thing. And I had a former partner that, oh, we have to have a mission statement. I go, no, we just have to have a mission. You have to write it down. You don't, and it used to, I don't know, and all these companies, you see they have mission statements. One of our clients, the head CEO guy, just got indicted on a bunch of stuff. Well, if he was following his mission statement, it wouldn't have happened, right? So I don't know. I just think you have to, I think these things are good. I think they're good to refer to. And I thought your seminar was excellent, because it changed what we think about diversity and inclusion. A lot of it is all about, how people look and how people are and what their ethnicity is, as opposed to the items that you were pointing out about leadership and being part of the organization.
Beautiful.
But,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you have to go to communication too. Where we have, you can go back to that, right, Linda, the generations, people don't communicate. And when they do communicate, they don't understand each other. So that too, it gets involved with this whole inclusiveness. If I'm saying something, the person I'm saying it to has no idea, they're not going to feel included.
Exactly. Which goes back to the communication that Whitney was talking about, right? Like the big question, tell me more. Seek understanding. And keep asking, be curious, do all those right things. And Carol, I think you do those things. I mean, you have the most amazing retention rate ever. And Carol has a lot of employees, by the way, in the architectural field. So that's not even an easy place to be, but by any means. But yeah, this was fantastic. I love this conversation too. Thank you for participating. Thank you for jumping in. Thank you for being your same. I mean, it's not surprising to me that you have my courageous women who are just like, but what about this? And here's my thoughts. And that is part of what makes this group so beautiful and so effective. So but with that, I hate to say it, but we are out of time. And
it has
I know
been
that
such a pleasure.
Has been absolutely fantastic. I know that you wrote down that the contact information, and I will be sending this recording out to the entire circle. And so you can go back if you want to, or you can share it with others in your organization that need to see it, if that is part of the case. And Thank you so much, all of you, for being here.